Hi, I'm Zibby Owens, and you're listening to Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. This 30-minute podcast features a new author interviewed by me every single day, 365 days a year, for about 30 minutes. I am also the publisher for Zibby Books, which publishes 12 books a year in fiction and memoir. Our books are already out now. You can check it out on zibbybooks.com. And we have a magazine called Zibby Mag, where we have lots of wonderful essays and lifestyle features. That's at zibbymag.com. We have classes at zibbyclasses.com. And I recently opened a bookstore in LA called Zibby's Bookshop at 1113 Montana Avenue at 11th Street in Santa Monica. I hope that you are able to enjoy some of our other offerings, but this here podcast is the basis of all of it and started in 2018, and no matter what I do, this is basically my favorite thing. Enjoy. Ann Beattie is the author of Onlookers Stories. Ann has been included in 5 O. Henry Award collections in the Best American Short Stories and the Best American Short Stories of the Century. She is the recipient of the Penn Malamud Award for Achievement in the Short Story. In 2005, she received the Ray Award for the short story. The former Edgar Allan Poe Professor of Literature and Creative Writing at the University of Virginia, she is a member of the American Academy of Arts and Letters and of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. She and her husband live in Maine, Virginia, and Florida. Welcome, Ann. Thank you so much for coming on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books to discuss Onlookers and, life in general.
I'm very happy to be here.
Well, why don't you start out by talking about your new collection and what made you, where these stories came from as a group, why a new collection now, and all of the backstory.
I didn't know at first that they would be related stories, and I must admit that I tinkered with a couple of them to, put them in and make them fit in a way that would make the theme of the book more, we would reinforce the theme of the book more. I started out writing just a couple of stories that were based in Charlottesville, Virginia, which is a town that I know pretty well. Back in 1975, it was my first job at UVA out of graduate school, and I've had a long history with the place. And of course, everybody in the nation knew Charlottesville was put on the map yet again by the Unite the Right rally that happened in 2017 with the neo-Nazis and the counter-protesters and the terrible death of Heather Heyer and so forth in Charlottesville. So as I began to write some stories based in Charlottesville, which is, again, just a place I feel very comfortable with. I know the terrain. I kind of know, landmarks, things about the place. I mean, it's very easy as a writer to at least write a rough draft when you can just sort of in your mind, bring those things forward visually and have settings for your stories. I realized that, I couldn't run away from the current controversy about the monuments coming down. So I decided that would be a unifying link of all these stories. So they're not linked so much in terms of one character following through in every single story or anything like that, but the fact that in the background of all the lives of the people in the, whatever it is, 8 or 9 stories in the book, are these contentious monuments. No longer contentious, removed, as well they should have been, but they're gone.
I really enjoyed the story about Alice Ott and her inheriting a home that from her boyfriend, quote unquote, maybe, who knows, and and how her family was at first, not surprised that was happening, and then delighted to see it, and all of that. So I really enjoyed that story in particular, but.
No, I'm glad. Well, I named her Alice Ott because there are references to Alice in Wonderland throughout. So, if you've read the story as you have, you know that there are all these lawn ornaments, and the girl in the story, who is a girl who's a very young teenager, when the story begins, is looking back and remembering and thinking of how at first she misunderstood or misremembered what these things were in the yard, and really it was kind of like an alternate Alice in Wonderland kingdom that her lover had created for her. And suddenly she just flashed on that as a much older person. But, I wanted that to be there in the story, and I named her Alice on purpose. And she certainly is a kind of latter day Alice in Wonderland.
Oh, I love that. I also started reading More to Say, your collection of nonfiction,
Oh, nice. Thank you.
which
Yes.
is really great. And I love how you talk about all the things that writers will do just to get out of the act of writing.
Yeah.
Like taking up photography or any of those other things.
Weeding, anything, whatever it
Yeah.
takes.
Anything, whatever it takes to get out of the deadlines or whatever. But also that you get to take different perspectives and pick different moments in nonfiction, which happen, and yet you can have these different ways into a story, even though it all just happened. So I don't know, maybe you could talk a little about that, because I found that so interesting, and the way you were approaching your nonfiction and essays, and how you even said, wait, maybe I could find it, how yeah, you're in the witness protection program, and you said, I've had fun sneaking around moonlighting as a nonfiction writer. My friends hardly ever commented. I assume because they never even saw my nonfiction. Anyway, you're funny.
And really, I mean, jokes on me, they didn't see it. I always, you think, oh, well, it might take years, but so-and-so will eventually read this piece by me in a fairly obscure place. Let's say particularly like a journal about photography or something. That's not something everybody is going to be likely to read on a weekly basis or anything. But I realized that there was just stunning silence through the years. And in fact, I didn't quite realize myself until this book was published by Godine, and Joshua Bodwell is the publisher. And the book was really his idea. This was not an idea of mine. So he knew more about it probably than I did. But he told me that the first piece in the book went back, I think, 30 years or 31 years. And that the most recent was a piece that I had published, I believe, in Narrative Magazine just the year before the book came out. So it really is a span of years in which I've been doing this. I've given people every opportunity, and I've hidden so well that nobody ever brings this up in conversation that I write nonfiction.
Well, the secret is out now.
Yeah, let's hope, loud and clear.
And in addition to nonfiction, of course, you do both short stories and novels. And how did you originally get into writing anything at all? Like, if you take me back to that, and then as you decide which form to follow, which is like the easiest for you, or how you decide even which to continue on, or maybe there's just more to say for novels, or how does that all work for you? And how did you get here?
That's a very different, it's a hard question in a lot of ways, because there are a lot of aspects to that question, really, as you realize. But I don't think I've ever, for example, started to write a short story and thought, oh, this is a novel.
Okay.
Or vice versa. Maybe I should. Maybe if it might be a novel, I should spare myself the misery and just continue 12 or 13 or 14 pages or something like that. But usually, I'm a short story writer. That's what I'm more easily suited to. The other things are a different kind of work. And I almost feel like you use a different part of your brain somehow when you're writing a novel, not just because it's longer in particular, but because you really have to, if your talent is to try to be subtle and to embody things in the story that are not going to be didactic or too obvious for the reader. If they think, oh, that's kind of cool, I didn't realize Alice was named Alice Ott, and then there's something else there about Alice in Wonderland, and should I think about that fairy tale as I'm reading the story? That's the kind of writer I am, and I'm putting things there, and I'm hoping some of them will spark and will go off together. That's awfully hard over several hundred pages, because you either hit it too hard or people lose it. They lose track of it over 300 pages. They're not going to lose track of it over a story that, in manuscript is maybe 25 pages.
True.
So that's hard. But to go back to your original question about how I ever got into this to begin with, I had very few talents. In fact, I would claim this to be almost like good luck that befell me rather than even talent when I started out, because I look back and I sort of wince and I think, well, it's wonderful that I didn't know a lot, because I wasn't scared off of this as a possibility of what I could devote my life to. I didn't know other writers in those days. There were very few MFA programs. Yes, there was the University of Iowa. There were a few other programs. Now, as we know, it's almost like, a lineup of things that most people do in terms of becoming a writer, which is to get an MFA. But I didn't do that. I didn't know other writers. I did have the good fortune when I was in graduate school to live in a house with a bunch of other people. And, everybody had their thing. I mean, somebody was a really good guitar player. Somebody was a brilliant scholar. There was Anne. What was Anne doing? Anne was writing these weird little stories, What did you write today, Anne? Or then, if they had a handle on who the character was, what did, let's say Sam do today? What happened today? So these were just fun. They were amusements. And I got so much reinforcement from my friends. And it kind of took over. I was at that time in graduate school in literature, which is what I have my graduate degree in, not creative writing. And I never took a creative writing class.
Wow.
It's hard to believe now.
Goes to show you, I guess you just don't need them.
Oh, they're helpful in their way.
No, I'm kidding. Oh.
Yeah.
No, I actually love writing classes. I haven't taken one in a little while, but growing up and even after college and, writing classes are something that it just never gets old. You can always learn, you can always improve. And no matter what age you are, you might as well go and you'll get there will be an output from the class, whether it's whatever the goal of it is. Like if you really want to write something, you could just take a class and have the deadlines and you have to do it. So
right.
So for the stories here, when you're writing and crafting a short story, even though it's not that many pages, I used to work with Lee Newman, who writes short stories as well. And she said, oh no, writing a short story is so much harder than a novel because you have to fit everything in, right? Everything is compressed and every sentence matters so much more. So when you're writing a story, how long does that take? Do you stew on an idea for a long time? Do the characters come to you first? Tell me about that process.
I certainly take her point. I certainly understand what she's saying. I don't think I look at it that way, though, personally speaking. It's fun for me. Mm-hmm. And it's not fun ever to start out with something and be very enthusiastic and find out that it's just not having any sort of motor of its own, that that you're forcing it in some way. You have to do that at the beginning of a story. You have to just sort of state some things. You have to orient yourself so that you can orient the reader. But sometimes those things just aren't as lively as you hope when you actually look at them, type there on your computer screen or however you write. And I throw those things away. I press delete. I would say I throw out certainly 50%, probably embarrassingly more than that, of rough drafts. And I don't recycle anything because it's not about the prose, it's about the whole work. And again, we're not talking about a novel, we're talking about a short story. Anywhere from 10 to 30 pages, something like that, conventionally, in manuscript. And if I have to press delete, I press delete and I start over. And I think, well, please, to my material, give me some feedback. Do something on your own that's sort of out of my control. That'll be the thrilling thing for me, because then I feel like I'm already communicating with something personally, and I'm not just controlling something. I'm not just willing something into being. That's of course not what your friend was saying at all, but just in terms of my own writing method. I think it's that idea that things are shaping up on their own and I better catch up with them that really motivates me and makes me able to write short stories more easily than novels.
Wow. It's this whole subconscious being transcribed onto the page in a way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What do you like to read when you're not writing? And do you prefer reading other short stories, or do you just read everything? Any lifelong favorites?
Well, certainly there are a lot of short story writers I hugely admire. If anything is published by Deborah Eisenberg, I'm right on it. If anything is published by Joy Williams, I'm right on it. Craig Nova, who writes very few short stories, actually, known for other things, his novels in particular, I think, just in a story called The Prince, I think he wrote one of the half dozen best short stories I've ever read. So there are certainly names that I look for, and I do subscribe to a lot of literary quarterlies and journals and read Narrative Magazine online and all that kind of stuff. So if anybody puts anything in my hands, 90% of the time I really do read it or try to. I just finished reading a really good book. I don't know if you've ever spoken to her, but it's called White Cat, Black Dog.
No. I have a black dog too, so there you go.
Oh, yeah. That's a really, really good short story collection, which itself is based on fairy tales. Some of them more usual to me, like Snow White, Rose Red. Others, to me, rather obscure fairy tales. But I didn't look at the models again. I just read the kind of revision into current time with certain sort of surreal aspects of them that I thought were really wonderful. That's by Kelly Link.
Okay.
A White Cat, Black Dog that I thought
Okay.
was terrific. I don't often, as a collection, this is an exception here, I don't often find things that I think, oh, this is great. I find one or two stories, but what's wrong with that? I mean,
Nothing's
I
wrong.
read poetry, the same thing. It's what moves you in the book.
Yes.
It's not a value judgment. It's just really what you find moving.
Yes. Of course, that's the trick of finding the right audience for any sort of book is that
Sure.
there's that intangible element,
Yeah.
and how do you communicate that to the right people who need it? But yes, no, I'm about to interview Kate Doyle about, it's called I Meant It Once, collection of stories by Kate Doyle. It's coming out in July. That's getting lots of attention. So anyway, it looks really good. So
Is that a first book?
that's my next collection. I'll show it to you. Is it her first collection? I should know this. Obviously, I have not prepared this one yet at all. Let's see.
Because I know I only asked because I know someone named Kate Doyle, but
Her short stories have been published in No Tokens, Electric Lit, Public Space, Split Lip, Wigleaf, and other publications. But it looks like she hasn't had any other books yet. She's a former bookseller, originally from New England, Public Writing Space Fellow. She's lived in New York, Amsterdam, and Ithaca. No? Anyway.
I'm not sure if it's the same Kate Doyle, but how interesting. What beautiful books you're showing me, by the way. They really look terrific.
Oh, these ones or this one?
Yeah. The one you're holding up, Kate Doyle's book. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I could just spend the whole time showing you the covers of all these upcoming books.
Please do. I love visual things.
Yeah. And then this is my last one. It's called Striptease. It's very different, but it's about millennial Los Angeles.
Oh, that's cool. I like that. Yeah.
I thought that was a really fun cover too. And then, of course, there's this one called Onlookers,
Oh, yeah. We went back and forth so much. I loved the concept of the cover. Absolutely loved it because, of course, when these huge heavy statues were removed, do you remember at the time how many photographs there were in the New York Times? I mean, just everywhere.
Yes.
The removal of them. I mean, it was like a post-mortem or something like that in a lot of ways. I mean, you felt like it was something between, a lynching and I mean, it had so many connotations, what you were looking at with the chains lifting these things up into the sky and being loaded off on flatbed trucks and so forth. But the idea that what you're seeing there is something disappearing and all that sky, it's like there is new possibility.
That's true.
And it is a new world. And you're sort of like watching the old world leave right on the cover. But we went back and forth because, not to say that I have the ultimate say, but I felt like, if they cropped it just a little more, if we had even less of the neck, maybe we didn't want to see the face at all. If it really was just the horse, like that was all that was left, because the horse was never the problem. It was the man atop it, right?
Right.
Yeah. So I loved the cover of this.
I love the cover too. It's so great. It's really so great. I like where it's. I mean, I really like the cropping, but whatever. I mean,
no, I do too. I mean, I think they came up with the perfect thing to make it, a headless rider on the horse. I mean, it said a lot.
Hopefully, not a headless rider. That would not be the best book.
No.
So, what do you like to do when you're not writing and working and all of that? What are some of your favorite?
Always writing and working. I work too much, and as you know from my essays, I go out and do things to avoid things.
Yes, exactly.
To avoid what I should be doing. If somebody comes to dinner tonight and they hand me a book and they say, "Oh, you've got to read this," and it's a friend and I trust their taste, I have a book of 20 pile of 20 books that I really want to read. That's going to go to the top of the pile, at least to look at it initially. It just really is. So it's amazing the number of books that sneak in that way. And what I like to do when I'm not doing that, my husband and I just got back from a couple of weeks in England. It was the first real trip we'd taken for a vacation since COVID began. So really that was an absolute thrill, going to museums and having lovely dinner with one of my ex-students, graduate students in London, and seeing another old friend there who used to work in publishing in New York. I mean, it was just thrilling to be out in the world again, I have to say. So generally, we like to travel a lot, and we've been curtailed like everybody else because of present circumstances, I will say, though, that last week when it rained a lot in Maine, I went out on 2 days and I really felt I kept my head down, not just because I was pulling out dandelions with a trowel, but because I didn't want my husband to be on to me that I was doing this instead of any of the work I should be doing.
Oh my gosh. Well, if there's one thing we've established, your procrastination methods,
Yeah.
No bounds here. So, and yet look at all the productivity. So it's like, it doesn't even matter. It all gets done.
Well, it's surprising to me. It is a lot of productivity, and certainly it's a unique circumstance in my life. And it's because really, Josh Bodwell, as I was saying, had the idea for this essay collection, but that came out on last Valentine's Day, and I wasn't anywhere where I could do any publicity for it then. So I'm kind of doing publicity for that now, but it's right on the eve of, I'm not complaining, but it's right on the eve of Onlookers coming out, so I'll have a lot of events that I'll be doing for that too.
Wow.
And it's just a lot at once. And I'm also just working on a very long essay I've been writing for a while too. So it's kind of frustrating because I'd like to get back to that. But basically, if it rains today, the dandelions will wait. I'm out to the backyard again.
I love that. Well, Ann, thank you so much. This has been so nice, and it's a pleasure getting to know you. You're such a literary legend. So thanks for taking the time to chat with me today.
Thanks very much for having me on the show.
It's my pleasure. All right. Have fun with the dandelions.
Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens and at Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Also sign up for my newsletter at zibbyowens.com and sign up for my virtual book club and meet lots of authors on Zoom every other week. Thanks so much to Steve and Ryan at Texture Sound for the sound editing. And thank you to Morning Moon Productions for providing this fantastic intro and outro music.